Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's just about to strike 2 o'clock, and I will be beginning my session on how to encourage the intellectual and academic development of your child in just about a minute. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the fourth session that we are doing over the last 3 weeks. For those of you who are interested in watching some of the earlier sessions we've conducted for parents as well as for working adults, feel free to check out our different Facebook pages. We did a session 2 weeks ago for parents as well on how to, develop resilience in your child as well as, help them manage stress during this MCO period. And it's part of our, special program for parents of our 3KDU schools, Real Kids, and Cambridge English for Life. But we're also opening this out to the public. So for everybody who is joining us, a really warm welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to come and share your afternoon with us. So my name is Chi Leong, and I'm the CEO of the Prestigian Group. We oversee all of the different education groups, including Sri KDU, Real, and Cambridge English for Life. And like I say, this special broadcast is going out, especially for our parents of our different schools and kindergartens and centers, but we also like to welcome any members of the public who are joining us today. Now, the topic for today is how to encourage the intellectual and academic development of your child. And I want to start with a little bit of a general introduction to why this topic is important and the relevance for this topic today. For those of you who followed my session 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about the VUCA world, right? The fact that the current MCO period and the current COVID crisis really is a good example and an illustration of how the world has become a VUCA environment. So that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the fact that, a virus could so quickly change the way we live, the way we work, the way we go to school in the last 2-3 months is an illustration of the VUCA nature of this world. And as part of that session, I talked about the fact that children needed this intellectual curiosity, and here I was speaking to the intellectual and academic development, the ability to think through issues, to connect the dots. And after that session, I received quite a lot of feedback and questions about this particular point. And the questions were about, Dr. Goh, I mean, what do you mean by intellectual curiosity? How do we as parents encourage intellectual curiosity in our children? And so that's why what I wanted to do was to spend a bit more time today talking about just how we go about that, and how do we develop this intellectual curiosity. 2 weeks ago, I talked about Bloom's taxonomy as a model that a lot of educators and parents use to track, how their child was able to develop their ability to think independently. And it starts from memory, but goes all the way up to creation and evaluation and analysis. And so I wanted to start off with this as a general introduction, and to remind everybody again of what we mean by thinking skills. The fact that it's not just about, how do I get my kids to perform well in exams and in school, even though I will touch on a few points there. But I think that the bigger goal and the objective really is, how do I develop the mind of my child so that by the time they're 17, 18, 19, and about to go off to university, and then beyond that start work, that what they have that is most valuable is their mind, that their mind is this sharp tool, able to think, to understand, absorb information, comprehend, analyze, join the dots. And therefore this powerful mind that they have is going to be, the key resource, the key strength they have as they navigate themselves through university and later on through work. All right, so I wanted to start off with that when we talk about intellectual and academic development, this is sort of the goal. I want my child to have this powerful mind so that they're able to perform well in their school, studies, exams, but beyond that, they are really able to think in a way that is going to help them navigate through this VUCA world environment that they will need to face, and they are able to survive and thrive in this environment because of the sharpness and the agility of mind that they have. All right. So with that in mind, I've got 12 tips that I want to share with all of you. So let's go through them one by one, and later on, if any of you have questions, I will set aside some time to try to respond to these. Right. So I think number one, we talk about you want to develop the intellectual and academic potential of your child. Number one is you need to acknowledge and be aware of this thing called intellectual curiosity. I talk a lot about this in almost any parenting seminar that I take, because I think this is really the one thing that a lot of us overlook and forget about or are ignorant about. And so I think that this is really important to understand, which is the fact that you have to understand the human brain is designed and has this natural instinct to absorb information. It's an evolutionary instinct that you have in many different species, but I mean, certainly with human beings, this is a very strong, mode, which is that the human brain, I mean, since birth, is really designed to master their environment. It picks up information. And this is important for the survival of the species in a sense, because I mean, if a young child is not able to master their environment, they are not able to survive in that environment. And so, I think we as parents need to remember that in the early stages of our children's life, we don't really need to motivate the child to learn. It's not something that we need to push top down. Children by nature are curious about things. So, I mean, we call this intellectual curiosity. I mean, their brains are soaking up information. They are naturally explorers and discoverers. And I think you see this, I mean, in a 7, 8, 9-month-old child. I mean, you put the child down in a new environment, in a new room, and you find that the child is sort of crawling all over the place and touching things and putting things in their mouth, of course, to the horror of parents, because we are worried that they touch something dangerous, But I mean, that just illustrates this idea that you don't need to motivate the child to explore. The child by nature explores their environment, and using all of their 5 senses, they try to understand everything around them. And this continues, to the time they are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years old, when they're asking, countless questions about the world, about society, about how the way things are. And, I know that sometimes as parents, we get very annoyed or tired or, worn down, because it's just endless questions, from 3, 4, 5, 6 years old onwards, in fact, all the way until, 9 and 10, if we are able to protect this intellectual curiosity, what I'm saying is that this is something that should last the whole of their lives. It's not necessarily something that should die off or phase out, in middle childhood. And I think it's testimony to the fact that something is not quite right, maybe with the way we are parenting, or the school system or the education system, when somewhere between age 0 and the age of 12 and 13 and 14, learning and education becomes a bad word for the children. When they don't enjoy learning anymore, and it's not something that they're excited about, then I think something wrong has happened. And so I think as a parent, to me, I see my role as a custodian of this intellectual curiosity. It's something that my children are born with. And so my role is, how do I protect this? How do I keep encouraging this natural curiosity, this force, mode in their brain that says, look, I want to understand everything. Why is electricity this way? Why is the sun and the moon and, society and the COVID crisis? I mean, I'm sure they have 1,000,001 questions to ask about the COVID crisis and the virus, and why is there a lockdown, and why do we need to be here? What is an MCO? So all of these things are a manifestation of this natural curiosity. And so my goal as a parent is, how do I keep this alive? And so I've given you a few tips here, which is number one, reward questions and inquisitions. That's the most important rule. I mean, whenever your child, of whatever age, whether they are teenagers or young children, are asking questions about anything. As parents, I think we need to treat this very seriously. So don't brush it aside as in, oh, you know, we don't care. Why is the moon round? Why does the moon change shape different times of the month? I don't care. That's not important. Go and read it up yourself. So don't brush it off. I think that the important thing is to treat this with respect, and the way to, in a sense, reinforce them to continue to ask questions is to answer them. And to work with them, and look, 90% of the time we may not have the answers to these questions, but I think because of the internet and readily available information, certainly we have the ability to go and find the answer. So often I would advise parents to say, okay, look, I don't have the answer. I'm not sure. So let's go and read this up together. How do we discover this together? And of course, for older children, you may even give them hints about how they can find the answers themselves. So rather than spoon feed them, you may say, okay, maybe these are a few places in the internet or books that you could read that help you find that information, or videos you could watch, talks you could watch of experts talking about this particular topic. But like I say, don't brush it aside, And I think the last point I put there is really important, which is, never ever, respond to a question by saying, hey, look, this is not important. This is not part of your school curriculum. This is not going to be coming out in your school exams. And so please don't waste time. Don't waste time talking to me about dinosaurs or COVID crisis or viruses or this or that. I'm not interested in this. This is not important. You should focus on your exams. As parents, we should never, ever limit their potential to learn and their interest to learn to just exam topics. I think this is very, very important, because nothing kills off the interest of a child than being told that, look, it's all about exams and all about tests. So I think as a parent, it's always about responding in a positive way to questions that they ask, and whenever they express, interest, and your young children will have interest for all kinds of things. So whether it's animals or dinosaurs or rivers or natural disasters or computers or cars, I remember both of my children went through different phases, where every few months there would be different interests that they have. And as a parent, my job is to reinforce them. It's natural that their interests will shift. This is, this is a sign of a good, healthy mind, intellectual curiosity. So as a parent, I want to create an environment. The goal is, as I put in these slides, to create a strong learning culture in this family. And that means that in this family, we all learn. Learning is good. Knowledge is good. Ignorance is not bliss in this family. That should be the philosophy of your family. Ignorance is not bliss. It's about understanding and knowledge and enlightenment that brings about positive change, brings about success in life. And so that's the goal. How do I create that kind of practice and culture in my home? And so the tip I've given you is answer questions. Be a partner with your children in going out to discover new things, and let them lead when it comes to interest. All right. And so, this brings me to sort of a related point, which is, I know many parents sometimes get intimidated by the fact that, look, my children know a lot of things that I don't. And that's certainly true for me. My children have far exceeded me in terms of knowledge about a lot of subject areas. And there are many times they ask me questions where, like I said earlier, I don't have the answer. And that's fine, because look, as a parent, you're not expected to know everything. That's not your role. Your role is a facilitator. And so oftentimes I might be actually lagging behind my children, because my role is not so much to lead them and to know more than them, but my role is to facilitate, to point the way, to help them find the knowledge and the information and the interest that they seek. Right? So let the child set the direction and the pace. The questions that we should be asking our week is, what are you interested in? I think allowing the child to exercise that freedom of what do I want to learn, as opposed to saying, okay, look, let's focus on, what does the teacher in school want you to focus on? And look, there's enough time for both, So there's more than enough time, I can tell you, in the day for your child to do their homework and their schoolwork, and have the online Zoom sessions with the teachers, and to do all of the schoolwork that they need to do to keep up with schoolwork. and more than enough time on top of that to actually also pursue their own learning and interests. I mean, I've always been a firm believer that, I mean, formal education, whether it's kindergarten or school or university, I mean, only at the most accounts for 40 or 50% of how our whole education. When you think back as adults to all of the things you've learned in the last 30, 40, 50 years of your life, I mean, look, how many of it really comes from school or university? I mean, more than 50% of it we learn from our own experiences through our own initiative. So I think as a parent, we need to understand it's not all just school focused and directed. It's also about allowing the child to pursue a lot of their own interests and letting them set the pace, right? Okay, let's move on. So tip number 2 is open up their horizons, right? For those of you who have just joined us, we are talking about ideas on how to develop your child intellectually and academically, right? So the second tip is, as a parent, I see my role as sort of like a tour guide, right? My role is to, I think, remind my children of how big and wonderful and interesting the world is. And that includes all of the things I put here, whether it's places and countries and languages and cultures, stories, games, history, geography, science, I mean, my goal is to make the world bigger for them, not smaller. All right, so I think this is the opposite of being too conservative or too narrow. As a parent, I want to open up their mind, not close it. I want to broaden their mind, not narrow it. I mean, that's the whole rationale behind, I think, academic and intellectual development. It's about the idea that, we want to hone their minds. And so that lifelong, way beyond, when they are children living with us, but when they are adults, they still have this intellectual curiosity, this love for learning, but their minds are kept sharp. To use an analogy of like a knife, that they keep their thinking and their minds sharp all the time because they've got this lifelong learning culture in them. So I think part of it is for me as a parent to broaden their perspective. And how do I do that? But spend time with them, talking to them. I mean, each meal time you have with them, each time, you have in the car, of course, this will be post MCO period. You think back to all the hours we spend in the car with our children, whether it's taking our children to school, from school, going for meals, going on trips, 3-4 hour drive to Penang, kind of thing. And you're all trapped in the car. And rather than everybody being on their headsets or headphones and with their iPads or screens, maybe just spend some time having conversations, talking about things. I grew up in a family where my father and mother, I mean, they taught us a lot of things. It was a very exciting, stimulating environment because they talked about everything. They talked about books that they were reading. They talked about Shakespeare. They were relating stories and movies they had watched. They talked about politics, about geography, about current events. That's something that I think is a really healthy practice for parents. To share with them, open up the world to them, excite them, interest them, right? But again, the idea is to open up the horizons. And another way to do that is travel. So I'm my wife and I are firm believer of travel as a really powerful tool for education. And I mean, look, we are not a wealthy family, so I think as most middle income families, I mean, budgets are limited, certainly for this year, but where possible, we've tried to save funds and money and resources as far as possible to take our children, to different parts of the world, to whether it's here in Malaysia, in Asia, to Europe, to Africa, to America, South and North. But look, I mean, where possible, where affordable, I think, taking them out of that comfort zone, taking them to different cultural contexts, to different places, to historical cities, so I remember when my children were a bit younger, we took them to London and we rented this, I mean, it was a university hostel right next to the National Art Gallery, next to Trafalgar Square. Now it's heaven, every second day we were walking down the road to go to different parts of the art gallery, visit the different museums, the Portraits Museum, Tate Modern, and I mean, that's what I mean. I mean, opening up your horizons and kids at that age, I mean, they were soaking it up. I mean, it was so interesting, just spending hours and hours talking about different paintings and the Renaissance period and the different styles of painting and impressionist paintings. I mean, I remember my daughter at that age, I think she was about 8 or 9. I mean, really got into art at that particular period because of that exposure, So nothing beats, I think, traveling and moving around and getting a sense of the real world. I mean, you want to teach Malaysian history, I mean, take them around Malaysia, take them to Malacca, take them to Perak, take them to Penang, all of the UNESCO sites in Penang and Malacca, so history comes alive in that sense. All right. So those just a few ideas, but I'm sure you can think of more of how you as a parent can play the role of exposing them to more interests, more hobbies, more activities, more pursuits. It all starts with us. So we need to be the kind of parents that are intellectually curious ourselves. The kind of parents that are following current events and world history and politics, and we are interested in art and performing arts. And of course, recently a lot of the performing arts have opened up, right? Free platforms. I know a lot of you watched Phantom of the Opera last weekend. I know we did. A lot of the Shakespearean performances now are made available. So that people can watch it. I mean, all of these are part of the horizons that I think we need to open our children up to. I mean, I think the saddest thing would be to raise children that are so focused on one or two different areas that they don't have the breadth of experience of being able to live a full life and not able to enjoy. So I think the comment I made in the last session was to say, what's the point if I raise my children and they've got excellent results and they go to the top universities and they go and get excellent high-paying jobs and they've got all the money in the world, but they have no idea how to spend that money. I mean, they have no notion of culture or interest or aesthetics, or they're not able to appreciate anything in terms of art and culture. I mean, what's the point? So I think opening the horizons is really about also getting them to appreciate the more beautiful things in life, right? Number 3, the third tip on how to develop your child's intellectual and academic potential is really build a strong foundation of language. And this is something that's why our Real Kids group, our kindergarten group, which is the largest self-operated kindergarten group in Malaysia, the strength is with languages. I mean, they've just won best trilingual program in Malaysia twice in a row through Parenthood magazine. So I mean, it's an incredible achievement, and I'm really so proud of it, because I mean, language is the building blocks of everything. They're the building blocks for thought. So I've always said, the first 4 or 5 years of life, what the parent should be focusing on with their children's education, focus on language. The rest of the stuff can, I mean, that's fine. I mean, like I said earlier, allow your child to have different interests, but the real trust and focus should be encouraging them to understand, comprehend, read, express, speak, listen, and that reading habit is particularly important. So that reading habit, I would say, is key, and I'll talk a bit about that later again. But the idea of language, and I guess part of that also is making sure that you build the confidence for the child to use language, because we know that, I mean, the best way to learn the language is to use it. It's very difficult to learn a language if the language is purely academic and I'm just reading it silently, but I've no opportunity to actually practice the language. Almost impossible to learn, right? And so I think as a parent, our role at home is to practice with them. Spend 1 hour a day just talking with your son and daughter about their day, and if they are learning Mandarin, then learn Mandarin from them. If you're doing Bahasa Malaysia, then speak Bahasa Malaysia to them. If it's English, then it's English. And again, the critical period for language is the first 6 years. First 10 years. It's related to the plasticity of the brain, the fact that the brain is programmed to absorb different elements of language, the phonetic structure, the sounds, the expression, the sentence structure, at earlier ages. Now, it's not to say that an adult can't learn a language. I mean, no excuse. Any of us can learn a language, up to the time that we are 100 years old. The difference, though, is that it's harder for us. So to acquire a second or third or fourth language when we are 30, 40, 50 years old, possible, all right? But it takes a little bit more effort. And so I think for younger children, it comes a lot more naturally because the brain is set up and programmed at that particular developmental cycle to absorb information about language. So we should really take advantage of that window, right? And so whether it's 3 or 4 languages, the first 6, 10 years of life, please expose your children to different languages and focus on that. Now, related to this, I want to talk a little bit about the reading culture because, I grew up in a family of English teachers. And so, we read a lot of books. We had a huge family library. We would buy books regularly. And that's a practice that I've continued with my own children as well. And, we are a reading family, all of us. We all enjoy reading different things. We read all the time. And to me, this is a key. You want to develop intellectual and academic potential in your children from a young age all the way up to when they're teenagers. It's never too late to begin, but begin this love of reading and make it a discipline, and again, the best way to do this is to lead by example, so if we as parents are not reading and all, then I can guarantee you there's not going to be a reading culture in our family. So I think the first step is to begin by our own examples. Let's all go to the bookshop. Kinokuniya, I think, is heaven for our family. Every few weeks or so, as we are dying to get back there after the MCO ends. But we all go to Kinokuniya. Everybody spends an hour. I give a budget to all of the kids, and everybody chooses 2 or 3 books, and we bring them back. And there's this buzz about being in bookshops or libraries because books are knowledge. And so if we are trying to develop this intellectual curiosity, this strong learning culture, books are the pathway to doing that. And look, when I talk about books, whether it's hard copies, which is of course still my preference, so I'm still a little bit old-fashioned. I like the feel of a book, but I don't mind reading e-books as well. So whether it's e-books or hard copy books, that's not so important as it's the habit of reading. And encourage them to read anything. Start with what they're interested in. So my practice is usually to let them choose what they want to read, so if they, for example, choose 2 books to buy in the bookshop, I would say, okay, I'm going to choose one for you, all right, because I want some input also into the kinds of things they are reading. I want to encourage them to read some of the classics, but at the same time, then they get to choose one book of their own, so I think that's a good compromise. So that way, the reading culture is not completely forced on them, but they are also choosing, genres and books that they really engage with. It really speaks to them. So whether it's fiction, non-fiction, whether it's classics, whether it's contemporary, literature, I think the good news now is that there are so many books. There's a wealth of books for every age group. So I would say, make it a monthly visit to the bookshop. All right. And as parents, like I say, we also buy our books. So that's why our children are getting the buzz and the enthusiasm for reading from us, because they hear their mom and dad going on and on about some book we've read, some mysteries, some thrillers, some science books, and because we sound so excited about the things we are reading, then it's right. It's something that passes on to them, this bug of reading, right? And whenever you've bought these books, the next step is then talk about them. So again, during dinner time, during breakfast time in the morning, everybody gets to share, right? So tell me a bit about the book you're reading. What's going on? What is it about? Is it exciting? Is it difficult to read? So all of us get a chance to actually share, and I think that feeds into the energy of a book reading family, right? So that's tip number 4. Develop a strong reading culture. Number 5 is encourage experiential learning. I often get emails and letters from parents asking me about how do we make the school curriculum alive. You get a letter about, oh, my son, they don't like this or this subject. And look, that's quite normal. All of our children, there'll be 1 or 2 subjects that they just struggle with. They may not have so much interest in, and I guess to me, I think as a parent, my role in supporting the teachers in school and the work that they are doing in school is, what can I do at home to excite and inspire interest in the subject for my child, And I think, let me start with one tip, which is, as parents, please don't, denigrate or downplay the importance of what they are learning in school. Like I said earlier on, we need to see it all in perspective. I said The balanced perspective is to say that school and formal education has an important role to play. That's 50% of your child's education. So that's not something that we should downplay. We shouldn't make statements like, oh, what you learn in school is all a waste of time. It's all theory. It's all nonsense. I've forgotten everything I've learned. And when we make comments like that, then it certainly discourages the children themselves from paying attention to schoolwork, from valuing what they're learning from the teachers. So I think as parents, we need to be careful with what we say, right? And it's true. I may not have been the star student in school. I may not have been paying attention. But look, my children are in the school system now, and my role is to encourage them and help them find joy in their studies. Not to make it worse by telling them, oh, it's all a waste of time. And it's not true anyway, because like I say, 50% of, I think, our academic and our educational base comes from school and university and formal education. Like I've said, the other 50% may come from the outside, but we need that balance of both, right? So anyway, coming back to the schoolwork, help them link their schoolwork with the real world. That's why in real schools, the new motto is real education for the real world. We believe that, to make education exciting for the children so that they're engaged and excited, they need to see how what they're learning connects with real world skills. That what I'm learning now is not useless. It's going to help me with things. Math is going to help me go out and buy stuff, be more independent. When my parents give me money, I'm able to manage my finances better. Later on, when I want to start a business, it's going to be helpful. And science is going to help me with all of these, interesting experiments that I wanna try out at home. And geography is going to help me because I love travel. And geography is really about travel. Geography is about discovering your world and how interesting the whole world is with different cultures and history. History is ultimate storytelling, So we tell our children, you're interested in stories, in thrillers, in political intrigue, you like Game of Thrones. Hey, Game of Thrones is nothing compared to real world history, Real world history is a lot more interesting, exciting, shocking, sometimes even cruel compared to actually, whatever fiction, we're watching on Netflix or reading in fiction books, So history is incredibly interesting, so I think, it's about us as parents showing our children how what they are learning in school connects to the real world. And I think we do that by experiential learning. Earlier on, I talked about the fact that if our children is, let's say, having trouble with history, and geography, then the best way is to take them around and show them, there are heaps of historical sites around Malaysia. And so bringing them to, you want to, my hometown is Taiping, so Taiping, of course, is very historically significant, the first railroad from Port Vale to Taiping, and all of the tin mining. And so, you want to teach them that and bring them to Taiping, bring them to Penang, bring them to Malacca, bring them to, some of the most beautiful geographic areas in West and East Malaysia. Teach them geography, when they're there in the cave, by the seaside, in the mountain, digging for rocks in geology, when they're actually getting their hands dirty, I think that's when the real learning takes place. And of course, look, this is where I think as parents, we have to help out the teachers. The schools can't do all of this by themselves. They can't be having field trips every single day, from Monday to Friday. So I think as parents, we probably have, a bit more space and time on weekends and all of that to be able to extend the child's learning by connecting what they're learning in school with the real world, right? And things like educational games. You want to teach, your children the importance of math. Hey, play Monopoly. You can't win in Monopoly if you can't do math, right? So the use of board games, that in a sense reinforce whether it's math or memory or language, games like Pictionary, Taboo, charades. These are all games that encourage, the expression of language. So anyway, so those are a few examples of how I think parents can play a very important role in bringing to life, what the children are learning in school, right? Number 6, coach healthy study habits. Now, I've used the words very carefully here. I've used the word coach because I think this is where the parents need to assume the role of coach. And I want to make a few statements here. I think number 1, we should not assume that our children naturally know how to study. All right. And I know, I mean, this is a skill that we teach in real schools, in Sri KDU, in real kids and all of that. But look, not all schools will teach this skill to children. So I think sometimes as parents, we need to start from the basics, especially when if we feel that our children are struggling with certain subjects, we shouldn't necessarily lead to the conclusion that they are struggling in a subject because they are lazy or because they lack motivation or because they are either they're neglecting the subject or anything like that, or they're stupid or they can't learn. I mean, I think we need to first look at the question of, does my child know how to actually study this particular subject? Do they know, how to approach a subject like math or geography or history or the languages, And if not, then okay, look, no panic. My role then as a parent is to give them some tips, some coaching to develop the basic micro study skill sets that are needed to approach this subject. So that's why I use the word coach. It's not about scolding them or shouting at them. It's about, okay, how can I maybe give them some methodology so that the way they're studying, makes sense? Because I can tell you, I mean, even at university, I used to lecture in university for over 20 years, and there were many university students that were coming. I mean, these are 19, 20-year-olds that have been in the school system for 12 years and coming to university. And we realized that what they were really struggling with was study skills. And many of them, I mean, it's not a lack of motivation or discipline. I mean, they are spending 4, 5, 6, 7 hours every day in the library. They're studying and they come to us and, they are in tears. I don't know how to study. I'm so frustrated. Am I stupid? I'm staring at this book for 3, 4 hours. Nothing is going into my head, And I think we realized that the problem was really that, a lot of these students just didn't know how to study. And that we had to have some basic study skills on how do you do note taking, how do you manage your time, how do you tackle different subjects, and what happens when you don't understand a certain material, what are some of the strategies to cope with that, because there'll always be times when you can't understand something, and so whether it's forming study groups, whether it's getting help, being proactive and being having the courage and the honesty to ask for help from the teacher, from the tutor, from friends. If you don't understand anything, using different study techniques, so I put here the slide. Some people, they can't just sit down in their desk and stare at a book and 1 hour it all appears in their head. I mean, not everybody studies that way. Some people need to walk around, I mean, I'm a pacer, so I'm my best ideas are pacing around my room or my office. I can't, think clearly if I'm sitting still, a lot of nervous energy sometimes, I'm a drawer, so my colleagues who are listening will know I'm notorious for this. I mean, my whole office, wherever I've been is basically just whiteboards, I mean, the whole office wall are just whiteboards because, I mean, that's how I think. I can't, I can't sit down and stare into emptiness and get a thought, I need to be drawing down flow charts and mind maps and, and map out my thoughts. And then that's where the inspiration comes. That's where I understand, I see the trend, I see the pattern, so I'm just saying, there are many different study habits that are there. I'm just giving you some examples of this, I mean, the other one that I remember realizing was that, I was one of those students that can't keep my textbook clean, so I can't just read off the textbook. I'm one of those that highlights and marks and has pencil marks, all over the place. So one of the skills that I learned, I think too late, in pre-university when I was doing my A levels and then in university, was that I really needed to be the textbook and the books that I was reading, assuming they are my own, of course, needed to be living documents. So, circling keywords, having a summary, thoughts and ideas behind each paragraph so that I could break down a whole chapter by summary words and then linking that. And so a lot of writing. So all of my books were very dirty in a sense, and that's fine, So I think all of these are things that, look, you can't assume your children know these things. Most of it we learn by trial and error ourselves, or by copying other students, So I think as a parent, one of the greatest gifts we can give to our children is to say, look, hey, this, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And not all the strategies will work for all children. They need to try different things until they, I guess, find a study strategy or a learning style that suits them. So some of them may need to write things, and therefore maybe what you can do is just, paint, their whole room with or install whiteboards, or there's something called idea paint that you can paint their whole room and they can maybe do notes. I mean, it may look messy, but if that's what it takes for them to understand the material, why not? Create a more conducive study environment, rather than something that is too neat and nice and rigid. And others of them, maybe they are more verbal, so they need to have study groups. They need to learn with friends. They learn when they verbalize, when they vocalize things. Some of them need to be walking around. So, and when you see your kids walking around, you don't scold them and say, "Hey, look, no, sit down, and study." All right, so I think we need to also be more open-minded about different study methods that exist, and the fact that all of our children are a bit different, right? But I sort of put here, the fact that therefore, as a coach, we need to approach this in a different way, and rather than focusing on results, we focus on skills, right? I mean, I guarantee you, when you teach your children study skills, the exam results will follow, all right? But my point is that don't focus just on the results. Focus first on the skills. Focus on the skills of them being able to read and understand. Focus on the skill of them being able to express themselves in writing, being able to write good essays, being able to summarize information, being able to connect the dots, being able to, digest, analyze complex mathematical formulas. All of these are skills. So as a coach, I focus on the skill. And I believe that once the skill sets are strong, then, I mean, there's no doubt the results will follow, right? But don't harp on the results. The focus for a coach is the skills, right? Also, we move from short term to long term. So, I mean, I remember, certainly my children and my daughter now, who is a bit older, from young, I was always sharing with her the idea that, look, always think long term, right? And this is a point I'm going to come to a bit later on. But the idea that, look, the purpose of education is long term, and therefore, I'm allowing you to struggle now, short-term pain, all right, and I'm allowing you to make mistakes now, because that's good for the long term. And I think this is very important, because I tell you what, sometimes as parents, we are so concerned about short-term results, all right, that we end up doing all of the homework for the children. We end up spoon-feeding the children. We end up, pressuring the teachers or the tuition teachers to spoon-feed our children, because we demand, I want the results right now. And I think that the damage that does, the danger of that in the long term is, therefore, your child who has been spoon-fed their whole lives, right, by teachers or tuition teachers or by ourselves, they have not in any way developed the strength of their mind or thinking. And so one day they're going to wake up and they're going to be 19, 20 years old, and they're going to be in a university lecture hall, like when I was teaching university in the first year class. And then they're going to realize they're not prepared for university at all, let alone work. Why? Because for the first time in their lives, they have nobody to spoon feed them. Universities, I guarantee you, don't spoon feed. In university, there is no past year questions. In university, there's no tuition teacher that can come and give you all the answers. In university, there, all of those support systems that sometimes are a little bit unhealthy that we give to our children are no longer there. And so I think when I talk about short term to long term, as a coach to our children, encouraging our children to really develop skills for themselves, we need to learn to let go and need to learn to allow our children to struggle a bit. Now, again, I say this in balance, all right? I'm not saying that the coach doesn't care, and I'm not saying that the coach is disengaged from your child's learning, that you don't pay attention to it, let your child do whatever they want. I'm not saying that. That's not the same thing. I'm saying that we need to engage, but we need to be very clear about what our goal of the coaching is. The goal of the coaching is to help them develop skills. To help them develop skills, they need to try the skills themselves. And when they try, they need to be allowed to make mistakes, because they're not going to be perfect all the time, right? So I think that that's sort of the idea. The rationale is, how do we, all right, engage with them? We can help, we can offer advice, we can encourage them, we can, offer tips once in a while when they're stuck. But by and large, we are allowing them to do their own work. We are allowing them to do their own learning. We are allowing them to finish their own homework and assignments. And if they struggle, then so be it. We are there to help, but we are not there to take away the difficult bits. We are not there to take away any kind of difficulty so that in the end of the day, there is no struggle. Because look, education is struggle. And I think it's also about communication. So I put a few notes here, by the way. As with always, I will give my slides and let my slides be available after the session so that all of you can download this. But, so rather than spending time nagging, don't nag, don't scold, don't, we should be focusing more on, look, calm, clear, instruction, advice, direction on what they should be working on, And so that's moving from, this scolding, nagging model to a coaching model. Focus on the skills, and therefore we also need to calm down ourselves. Sometimes we are so stressed out as parents. We are so much under pressure that, I think we in a sense, sometimes it overwhelms us, and we put therefore our children under a lot of pressure. So I'm just saying, you want your child to succeed in the top universities in the world, you want them to get the best jobs in the world, then you need to listen to this advice. Spoon feeding them is the worst thing you could do, because like I say, they may, maybe they may get straight A's in the short term, but I promise you, by the time they get to tertiary level education or to work, they are not going to have the skill sets to survive, right? So give them the skills, especially early on in primary school. I promise you, the results will come. I've seen this time and time again. I've been in education for 25 years, both in university and in K-12, in primary, secondary school, and I can tell you, this is absolutely true. You build up good skill sets when they are younger, they will deliver the results by themselves without needing, like I say, our help in the end, because they are able to do it. All right. These are some online resources. So like I say, I'll leave these notes for you. This is just an example of 3 different websites. There are hundreds of them that are available that actually have tips on study skills, right? And how to teach your children study skills. So again, for those of us who have no idea, you're telling me, Dr. Goh, I have no idea how to teach study skills, then this is some reading that you can do to help your children with this, right? Now, number 7, the 7th tip on how to encourage intellectual and academic development in your child: allow some independent and creative thought. Now this again is very important, because if we want our children to get into these top universities anywhere in the world, whether it's the Harvards or the MITs or the Princetons or the Oxford or Cambridge, I can guarantee you, that they need to show some independent thinking and thought. Memorizing the whole textbook is not going to do it. They're not going to get through an Oxford Cambridge interview or a Harvard interview, by just regurgitating things that they've memorized. They need to show that they have some creative and innovative thought. And again, children by nature, when they're young, will express this. So whether it's allowing different opinions, different ideas, whether it's especially when they are young children, it's very natural for them to learn by play. So whether it's imaginary play, let's pretend this is a ship, let's pretend this is a castle, let's pretend this is a storm, and a lot of children's play in the first 10 years is this kind of imaginary play. And I'm telling you, as a psychologist, a cognitive psychologist, this is not a waste of time. This is absolutely important, to give children time to play, independent play, and use their imagination and develop that imagination. It's funny, sometimes when the children is young, we sort of kill off their imagination and we say, okay, you're being too imaginative, too playful. You need to get back to your books, focus on more serious things. And then, fast forward 20 years time, when we are interviewing for jobs in our companies, we are interviewing managers and leaders and new employees. And what is our comment? We all say, see, this person can't think for themselves. This person shows no imagination or creativity. So there you go, No surprise then that there's no imagination and creativity, because basically allowed our children from child to succeed in this 4th industrial revolution, to succeed in this VUCA world, in a myriad of different professions, then allow them this space to have independent creative thought. Imagination is one of the most powerful mental skills they will need to solve a lot of problems in life, whether they're going to be businessmen or entrepreneurs or whatever it is. Like I said, leaders with no imagination have no vision. Imagination equals vision. the ability to see things that don't exist yet and see the possibilities of that. Now, that's the power of imagination. All right. So allow that in your children. Give equal priority to things like creative arts, drawing, craft, music. I mean, these are not unimportant subjects. I can tell you, music, a lot of music encourages mathematical ability, being able to look at notes and timing. Craft and drawing, design technology is becoming the most important subject now in the fourth industrial revolution. You want innovative, creative leaders to go into sectors like technology and engineering and architecture and science, drawing and craft, right? So when your young child wants to draw and paint, make sure that that's part of it, and choose a school that has a strong emphasis on things like performing arts, art and craft. Never be in a school that is so narrow that they're focusing only on certain subjects at the exclusion of these creative subjects. I mean, now, like I say, the last 4 years, everybody is realizing that creative arts is incredibly important, as important as everything else, right? Okay, tip number 8, encourage and cultivate dreams and aspirations. I think this is especially important for older children, but you can start this from a young child as well. This is part of helping them slowly realize and discover, what their dreams and aspirations are for the future, in terms of whether it's professions, in terms of things they want to do. Now, this is very important because it creates motivation for studies. So particularly for older kids, and you're preparing them for SPM, you're preparing them for IGCSE, for A levels, for university entry exams. And some parents say, well, I do not, my kids are not motivated at all to study because they don't seem to think it's important. And I think that's the case. They don't think it's important because to them, going to university is not a very exciting notion. Starting work is not a very exciting notion because they don't know what they want to do. You see, that's the problem. So I think getting them excited and interested in something is the key. I mean, I tell you a story. When I was one of my earlier years lecturing, I mean, there was this boy who was failing subjects in university. Every year he would come and fail, and he used to be known as a serial failure. And because, I mean, he came from a very rich family, I mean, it didn't bother him that he was sort of wasting his parents' money and coming back every term and failing. And there was one term he came back and he started actually performing very well. So from being an F student, he became a B student, and which is very good. I mean, B in university is not easy to get. And so, I mean, we all were curious. And so I talked to him and I said, what happened? I mean, what was this transformation? I mean, did your parents scold you or what? And he says, what happened was he was traveling in some country in the world. And he says he really enjoyed traveling independently for the first time. And while he was traveling, on a train somewhere in Europe, he met a fellow traveler who happened to be a travel reporter, travel journalist, right? And they were talking, and he fell in love with that idea of, look, you know what? I love traveling. I want to be a travel journalist. I think this is going to be a dream job. And the travel journalist told him, look, I mean, if you want to be a travel journalist, hey, you need a strong degree. You need to show in your university studies that you're performing well, that you can write well. You can't be mucking around and playing around. And so when he came back after that holiday, he was a changed man, young man. He started really focusing on his studies. Why? Because for the first time in his life, he has a goal. And his goal was, I want to be a travel journalist. And so I need to complete this degree in mass communication with a B average so that I can then apply to these travel journalism companies. And in the end, I mean, the good news is 3 years later, he actually graduated and he did become a travel journalist, And so, I mean, I think for those of you who are frustrated, and you're worried because your child doesn't seem to care about their studies, it's about then showing them the connection to say, look, well, first, find an ambition or goal, and you realize that almost any kind of ambition requires some preparation or training or study. Maybe in different areas, but you're going to need some preparation. I mean, there's no career in the world that doesn't require any kind of preparation or study. And I think that's when the motivation to learn becomes stronger, because then they can see a link between their current studies and their future. And I think this links to number 9 as well, which is, I'm saying for teenagers. So for those of you who've, your parents of teenagers, it's about give them the full picture. I mean, speak to them like adults. Tell them the truth, right? You want to motivate them about their studies. Tell them the truth about the way the world works. And so what I've said here is, I've said, it's all right to have a balance, all right? Seeing education and learning in a romantic way, which I think I've shared earlier, the love of books, intellectual curiosity, and all of that is fine. But at the same time, there needs to be a pragmatism about our approach. And I think as Asian families, most of us, we understand that pragmatism, which is that education prepares you for future success. Right? This is true, worldwide. So as parents, we see this education as a tool, it's a stepping stone for a brighter future. And I think there's nothing wrong with thinking that way. And to me, share that with your child. I think when my daughter was 12, I was already talking to her about, look, man, this is the system. This is the way it works. In the end of the day, look, I don't really care about how you perform in, your when you are 12, 13, 14 in your school exams. Those are really trial runs. What is really important is your university exam. Your pre-university exams, is important because at that level, those results will determine the kind of courses that you can do and the kind of universities that you can enter in. And so whether you like it or not, that's the real world, So if you're going to get a DDD in your A levels or STPM or matriculation, hey, you're not going to get into Cambridge and Oxford. So I'm not saying you have to go there, but that's your future, So it's your aspiration, it's your dreams. Most universities are not going to take you in with bad grades. And so look, it's not about parents putting pressure on you or parents, in a sense, forcing their dreams on you. I think my previous point, I forgot to mention that it's not about the parent developing the dream for the child. So, we need to be very mindful and wary of, living our dreams through our children. So don't do that, right? That's the worst thing in the world. The quickest way to demotivate them is to sort of, dump your own dreams and goals on them. So, with my children, I've always told them from the beginning, hey, look, it's your life. I just want you to be happy on your own terms. And so you pick success. You decide what success looks like for your life. My job, Papa and Mommy, is we just want to give you all of the support and all the skills and all the advice in the world to help you reach the goal that you have set for yourself. But it's important that you need to take ownership of your dreams and goals, right? But, like I say, once you've got that target, then my job is to give you the full picture, to say nothing comes easy in this world. This is not a fairy tale, no pain, no gain, right? So whatever goal or dream you have, whether it's to go to a top university, whether it's to be an entrepreneur, whether it's to be a millionaire before you're 30 years old, whether it's to travel the whole world, whether it's to be the next, Malala or, Florence Nightingale or serve humanity. That's your call. My job as a father, as a parent, is to advise what is the roadmap to get to your goal. And inevitably, that roadmap is going to involve education in most cases, right? Education in different forms, but it will involve education and it will involve hard work. So I think for teenagers, certainly from the age of 12, 13, they're old enough to understand. My daughter, my children certainly understood that. They had no problems understanding, when I told them this is the way the world works, right? I remember when I was young, I think the most effective thing my father told me in terms of motivating me, because I was never, let me just say, I was never sort of a model student until only later in university did I actually start to wake up. But I remember he talked about the fact that, look, as a teenager, as children, you all want freedom, right? And it's true. For teenagers, freedom is that big carrot. That's the reward. They want more freedom. They want freedom to do what they want in their life. And so, as a parent, I think we can feed into that to say, you know what, great. You want more freedom. You don't want people restricting you. So let me tell you this, all right? The worse your grades are in school, the less freedom you have to decide actually what you want to study in university. Because the worse your grades are, the options you will have are a lot narrower. The kind of universities that will take you in, the courses that you can pick will narrow from 100 to 1 or 2. So look, it's your future. You're not studying for me. You're studying for yourself. So you need to take ownership of that. But Papa, my role is I'm telling you the truth. I'm not lying to you. I'm not making up some story to try to motivate you to study. I'm telling you this is the way the world works. And so you want to succeed in this real world, you need to understand the rules. All right? And so I think And most teenagers, they understand. I mean, we sometimes underestimate the ability to grasp reality. And so they understand, they know what is driving them, why they need to pay attention to their studies and certain subjects, and what drives them, what motivates them, what inspires them. So I would say, tell them the truth. For teenagers, you want to motivate them, tell them the truth, right? Don't lie to them. Tell them, this is the way the real education system works, and this is the way to go about it. So I would say, show them the playbook, right? Talk to them about the VUCA world, talk to them about the fourth industrial revolution, talk to them about how job uncertainties exist, and therefore, there are qualities that they need to develop. So basically, this is the talk that I gave 2 weeks ago. All of these VUCA qualities, I mean, we tell our students all the time, it's not some secret recipe that we keep from our children. I tell my children all the time, these are the things you need. Resilience, intellectual curiosity, digital mindedness. I mean, the more transparent you are, the greater the chance that they will take ownership over their own academic and intellectual development, right? So don't hide things from them. Number two, emphasize independence. And a lot of parents write to me about, I know there's a lot of frustration, when it comes to, the idea of my kid, it doesn't study, they're lazy, they don't do their homework, I have to nag them every day, wake them up from school every morning, remind them to do homework, remind them to put the computer down, focus on their work. It's sort of, over and over and over, right? And I agree, and absolutely. As parents, we are more stressed out, I think, than our children. Of course, now during the MCO, reminding them to log on to Zoom, get on Google Hangout online, pay attention to the teacher. So, I mean, I've been sort of course, observing the online classes that our schools have been offering from time to time. So I'm watching to see what's going on. And of course, most of the time, I'm also seeing the parents sitting next to the kid, especially if it's a younger kid, because they're so worried that the kid can't follow the lesson. So I think I completely understand, but I would say the key is this, right? The key is this. The key is you need to start developing your child's independent skills and start conveying the message to the child that, hey, look, this is your work. This is your schoolwork, not mine. And you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for me, right? And so it's not so much about you work only when I'm around. You work only when I tell you to, It's about the child realizing that gradually they need to take ownership and responsibility for their work. And I think this is a wider issue of this is the way you prepare them for adulthood. You don't give them the responsibility and teach them how to face the consequences of good and bad decisions. I promise you, they will never grow up. And there are many adults, I mean, I think you all know this. There are many adults who are 30, 40, 50 years old who are also haven't grown up. And that's why they're struggling in life. They have no success in anything, in their work, in their careers, in their relationships, in their family life, in their marriages, because they don't grow up. Why? Because they never learn to take responsibility, And so I think if we don't want this for our children, I mean, I'm sure that's not what we want for our children, isn't it? We want to, we don't want to raise, man and woman childs who never grow up, even though they're 20, 25 years old. So to me, the key thing about adulthood is to take responsibility, right? And so, I've given you some guidelines here. Now, this is not something you need to follow. I mean, what you have on your screen is, this is more a rule of thumb that my wife and I have sort of used, right? That from 6 to 8 onwards to about 10, 12, guided work. So, of course, the parents still guides them, some reminders. When they are young, they need that structure, their guidance. But by the time they are about 11 or 12 years old, they really should be at the stage where, they need to be doing their own homework without reminders from us. They need to know what needs to be done, preparing for exams, packing for school, how many hours they need to set aside for some self-study every day to keep up with their schoolwork. By 11 or 12, as a parent, we shouldn't be spoon feeding them that way, right? And from 13 onwards, certainly this was the experience with my daughter. Then it's complete self-management. The parent then becomes an external consultant, So our role is just to go in there once in a while and just check on you. If you need help, I'm here. You need advice, I'm here. I'm senior management, checking on KPIs every 6 months or 1 year. But the day-to-day running of it, from secondary school onwards, the child should completely manage it. Now, It's never too late to begin this. So please don't discourage. Some of you looking at this chart will say, look, too late. My child is already 14. It's never too late. So begin. Now, the scary thing about this then, parents, is you need to let go, right? So to teach your 13, 14, 15-year-old to say, look, now you're responsible. So have the briefing to say, hey, from now on, right now, this is what's happening. I'm having to remind you about everything. I check your homework for you. I'm the one who, checks whether you understand things. I'm the one who decides whether you should go for tuition or not. I'm doing all of this work for you. So from now on, you're 14, 15 years, you're old enough. You need to make your own decisions. So this is what's going to happen starting next Monday. I'm not going to wake you up to remind you about your Zoom sessions in schools. I'm not going to be checking your homework, all right? And so the thing is, you need to be responsible. And so if you don't do homework, then you pay the consequences. I'm not going to be there to actually remind you. And so as parents, the most scary thing is you need to allow them to fail, right? And of course, I'm saying it's better than that they fail, right? So, it could very well be a worst case scenario. They may even fail an exam or two, but better that they fail a test or an exam or a homework assignment when they are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, all right? Rather than wait until they're 17, 18, 19, taking pre-university exams, STPM or SPM or A-levels, and then, it's a little bit too late, right? So I would encourage you, all the way until Form 4, to be honest, their results really has no long-term consequences, right? I'm not saying the results are not important, but I'm just saying that's the time to give them the opportunity to succeed and fail on their own merits and allow them to make mistakes. And of course, after a while, they will realize, there are consequences. Like you don't do your homework, then, hey, you go to school, there are consequences of that. You don't pass an exam, there are consequences of that. So it's important to, like I say, continue to encourage and guide, but slowly withdraw and give them room to take responsibility. Because I promise you, as long as you're taking responsibility to remind them and nag them and all of that, they will never take responsibility. You know why? Because they don't need to. All right? Human beings, we do things because we have to. Right? So when you withdraw and say, look, now you're in charge, I promise you will see changes. Okay? But at the beginning, it may be a bit tough. So you need to swallow a bit of failure. You need to swallow your tongue and control yourself. But don't get involved. Let them, certainly from the age of 13 onwards, you need to give them the responsibility to take care of their own learning. All right. And I promise you, short-term pain for everybody, it may stress you out more as a parent as well as the children. But over time, over the next 6 months and 1 year, there will be huge gains and success. All right. So, you have to be patient. It's not going to be overnight. Right. But you need to give them the opportunity to learn to be independent. Number 11, and this is my second last tip, so I'm ending at 12. So, there are only 2 more tips before we end. Encourage some fighting spirit. I talked about this last week when I talked about, I talked about resilience, right? Building resilience. That children nowadays, we should love them with unconditional love, but at the same time, don't spoil them. Don't overprotect them. Children need to be exposed, to the appropriate levels of some pressure, some stress. It's okay. It's not going to kill them. Of course, as parent, you then discern what is appropriate levels of stress and pressure as they grow older and older. But look, this world is a difficult world. So encourage this fighting spirit. You need to encourage them to say, look, academic development is not easy. Learning by definition is moving out of your comfort zone. And when you move out of the comfort zone, you're not always going to win. Not everything you do is going to be easy to learn. Not every test you take is going to be a straight A. Not every assignment you do is going to be 100%. And you know what? When you go through disappointments, that's part of education. In fact, failures is the most important part of education because that's where you learn to be stronger. You learn that failure is not a deterrent to you. That these disappointments and setbacks actually make me stronger, make me more resolved, And so I think that fighting spirit, fighting spirit is a word we don't use a lot. I think we need to bring back this word, fighting spirit. We need children with fighting spirit, the guts and the gumption when life knocks them down. They get back up again and, they keep riding, and that's something that we should reinforce. So I've got a few quotes here. I'm not going to read all of them, but this is something that you can go back and look through. Like I say, I'm going to give you the notes, later on. So this illustration, we talk about failure is like a rung on the ladder. I mean, each time you fail is an opportunity to climb higher, and of course lots of stories. So I think with children, I like to tell stories. So these are some stories that I've given you. You can share. The next time your child or your teenager is really disappointed, Papa, Mommy, I studied so hard, I still didn't get my A, or I failed the exam, or I put so much effort into this class project and the teacher didn't like it. And, so again, your response is to say, you know what, what you're feeling is natural. It's normal to feel disappointed, and I know you really worked hard. I want to praise you for that. I mean, I'm so proud of the hard work. I know you're disappointed with your mark, but don't feel too bad about it. All right, this is something that is natural. You need to learn from this, so like Thomas Edison, who the teacher said he was too stupid to learn anything, was fired from 2 jobs, 1,000 unsuccessful attempts at inventing the light bulb before he got it right. Michael Jordan, I was just watching this really good documentary on Netflix, The Last Dance, on Michael Jordan's time in the Chicago Bulls. I mean, I'm a sports fan, basketball fan. So Michael Jordan, I mean, he was dropped from his high school basketball team, and this is his quote. He says, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and miss. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed." And I love this kind of thinking. So I think that's the kind of resilience and fighting spirit we need to give to our children. Not so much to make them afraid of failure, afraid to try. And that's why when they fail, that's not the time where we go shout at them even more, make them even worse. It's about raising them up and say, hey, look, it's okay. It's natural to feel bad. And all of us do that. I feel bad sometimes as well. But, you need to get up, because you look at all of these heroes, right, who have experienced failure. I mean, Albert Einstein, I mean, the teachers regarded him as mentally slow, unsociable, He was refused admittance to his first polytechnic. The first PhD dissertation was turned down. I mean, so all of these people have gone through failure. Rodin, the famous sculptor who, sculpted the Thinker, I mean, in the middle of Paris, you can go and see this painting, I mean, 3 times he failed to get into art school, right, Walt Disney was fired by the newspaper for the lack of creativity. I mean, this is the person who built Disneyland. Star Wars, I mean, George Lucas, when he pitched the idea of Star Wars, I mean, people thought it was a horrible idea. 7 studios rejected it. They thought it was a stupid idea. I mean, and of course, eventually, this fighting spirit of not giving up, and just because life knocks me down and I go through disappointments doesn't mean I'm going to give up, Henry Ford, I mean, he went bankrupt 5 times. I mean, most of us, we go bankrupt once, we already are discouraged, and we tell ourselves, I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. I mean, this guy went bankrupt 5 times before he succeeded in building Ford Motors. I mean, he's one of these forefathers of, modern entrepreneurship, right? So I think, the idea of tell stories to children, so that they understand that, look, there's nothing wrong with them. Just because they've got a bad day in school, they failed on 1 or 2 things, doesn't make them a failure in life. Doesn't mean they're stupid, doesn't mean they're incapable. And I think as parents, never ever make your children feel as though they're stupid and incapable. I mean, we all have good days and bad days, even as adults. So I think it's about, rolling with the punches and coming back up. And the last thing, I want to share before we end. So the last tip, how to build intellectual and academic, development in your children, lead by example. I mean, we need to develop our own selves academically, intellectually. When was the last time we read a book? What are our own current learning goals? Are we learning new languages? Are we learning new skills? Are we excited about, stretching our own minds, right? So intellectual and academic development is sharpening your mind, right? So what are we doing? And so I think, look, whether you realize it or not, your children see what you're doing, there's that saying, right? I mean, our children don't do what we say, they do what we do. So we can stand there and say everything we want to our children about do this, read books, study harder. But I mean, if we are not showing them that we are also struggling, we are also trying our best in our own imperfect way to develop our minds, whatever age we're at, I think, it's going to be hard to develop this strong learning, intellectual, academic culture in our families. Right? So I want to end there, and say, in summary, the goal is to develop this intellectual academic culture in our home where everybody enjoys learning. And I promise you, once you've got this kind of a culture in your family and in your children, I mean, don't worry about the academic results. I promise you, the exam results, it will be fine. These students will go on and shock you and surprise you and beyond your wildest expectations and dreams. But like I say, it's got to be more than just about the exam results. Learning and development needs to be more about learning itself, and this love for knowledge and love for learning. And that's what's going to make them special when later on they end up in university, and they end up in a workplace that they really enjoy and they find stimulating, because they have this love for learning. All right, so thank you so much. Now I want to end by just reminding everybody that 2 weeks ago the CELT team in real schools have developed something called the Real Parenting website. So this is from Real Education, and they've put together this site, and so you can see that there's a website address there called realparenting.real.edu. Now that is open for the public, so anybody can log on online, but it has got a whole bunch of, I think, more than 300-400 articles on different things. It's got videos, it's got articles on almost everything, and of course, the flavor of the month now is what on earth do you do with your child during the MCO period. So it's got some really good ideas and thoughts on what you can do with your child, helping manage your child during the MCO. But it's also got ideas about study skills and learning and making learning fun as well. So please go log on to this site. The CELT team and the team has really spent a lot of work doing this, and they're doing a wonderful job, fantastic resource. So all parents from Street KDU, Real, CFL, please log on. But anybody else, feel free to pass the word on to other parents and friends and relatives as well. This is our website. This is sort of our gift to the world. We know that as parents, it's not easy to get resources, right? So we've curated what we think are really useful articles and videos here. So please go and log on and have a look, right? So thank you, everybody, right? This is me, Chi Leong, signing off for today. Thank you for taking time to join us, and all the best with this MCO period, and all the best developing your child for the future, right? So thank you so much. I will make my notes available in a couple of minutes, all right? So just be a bit patient. We'll add it to the discussion list here, and thank you so much, everybody.